Hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of the 007 Files. I'm Bill Koenig, along with my co-hosts David Leigh and Javi Trujillo. Guys, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks, Bill.
Doing well. It's a nice rainy morning, enjoying some coffee.
Well, today we have some odds and ends that have come up here in the recent weeks, and so we thought we would kind of do a roundup. And I thought we would start with yet another Bond-related novel that's been announced by IFP, in which a retired Bond teaches young would-be secret agents, gives him their, I guess he passes along his inside knowledge about the business. Gentlemen, what did you think about this particular project?
Obviously that it's not for me. They made a point of saying it was, 8 to 12-year-olds, I think, in the press release. And that didn't stop me from buying the young Bond books when they came out, because, it was more Bond content, and it was set in the Fleming timeline. It was supposed to line up with Fleming's works, and I kind of thought that was interesting. But this is a whole different beast, and I just skimmed over the release, but it felt like that maybe Bond isn't necessarily the driving force or the main character, and he's going to be teaching them as much as they're educating this old man, the ways of the world. I mean, you have to see what the setup is, and I don't want to judge it before having even read it, but it just doesn't sound like something that I would be eager to put on my bookshelf, even though it's Bond. But, we'll see.
Yeah, I was stunned, I think, when I saw the announcement. I wasn't expecting that at all. Maybe a bit more from Moneypenny and something else from one of the other secondary characters. But Bond as an instructor to these kids was not on my bingo card. So I'm in two minds about it, really. I read Silverfin when the first Young Bond book came out, but I didn't continue after that because it was really too far from how I imagined Bond's childhood to have been from reading the Ian Fleming books. Mm-hmm. It's weird that I have to specify Ian Fleming books with regards to Bond, though. So it's not for me, definitely. For kids, well, if it's going to encourage kids to read, I think that it is a good thing. But on the other hand, having said that, when I was 8, I picked up my dad's copy of Casino Royale and read it. I don't think you necessarily need books specifically written for kids, but I don't know if that was just me because I've read adult books most of my life. So, yeah, that's another reason not to read kids' books now, I guess. So, I'm in two minds about it. I think there are some positives to it, but I think it's a weird choice for me.
Well, just to reinforce your point, I remember the first time I read a James Bond, Ian Fleming novel. I actually checked it out at the public library. And I remember I checked out, they apparently had a U.S. first edition of Thunderball. So I remember reading that, and there was an omnibus of the first 3 Fleming Bond novels, and I read that. So, and then later I started buying my own copies as there were new paperback editions. So yeah, I didn't need a special young person's edition of Bond.
Well, when I first read Fleming, it was a combination of my dad's paperback. He only had 2. It was Casino Royale and Colonel Sun, which of course isn't Fleming. But then my mum used to get me some of the books out of the library for me, and also buy secondhand paperbacks from a local market, and used to be able to pay nothing for these secondhand books. But the Bond books from the library were first editions, so I wish I hadn't returned those, and I should have paid the fine.
I mean, the idea behind it of noticing that literacy rates in the UK are down, I think it said 20%, trying to entice kids to read is a good thing. There's so much vying for their attention from social media and movies and video games and TV shows that it's an important hobby to encourage and a skill to have. But I don't necessarily think this is the right way to do it. And I get that, Harry Potter was a big hit, and Yeah, I read those as an adult and enjoyed them. I read them to my kids and they enjoyed them.
What age was Harry Potter aimed at, though? Was that the same 8 to 12?
It was the young adult or the just before age. I don't remember what they were specifically categorized as. And they got more complex, too, as the series went on. But I don't think you have to have kids being the focus point to entice kids to read anything. And we talked about this in our chat off mic, that you read it just fine as a kid reading Bond. And you want to be Bond. You don't want to necessarily be the kid. You want to be the kid doing adult things.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's like the whole reason why they brought in Robin for Batman and Robin, to have like someone for the kids to identify with. But most kids want to be Batman because he's the cool adult. And I'd be more enticed to read it if it was a Bond adventure that, I don't want to say watered down, but, more appropriate for kids' sensibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Like that would be more enticing for me to like maybe pick up than an old Bond who's no longer a 00 and kind of retired and now he's got to deal with these young kids. Like it feels like a weird fit for Bond. And then there's so much of our media where like our heroes are now old and decrepit and bitter, and I totally get that sensibility, from being a kid to then being an adult. Life is definitely harder than what you thought it was when you were younger. But I think that, if it was just more Bond focused, it would have a better chance at reaching people. But I mean, that's to say, I don't really know anything by this author, and I hear he's very good, and I'm sure he's working really hard at it, but I just don't know if it's quite the right thing to do. And we're in this weird period right now too, where like IFP is making a lot of books in the last 5 years, but we haven't gotten anything contemporary.
The reason I think they're doing it, Javi, is because of the copyright on Bond expiring in 10 years. I think they're trying to get another series going before that copyright expires, and they're not really very they're kind of trying this and that, trying to find what works, and I don't think they've succeeded yet.
Because I enjoy Sherwood's books, but there's no Bond in them.
Well, the one contemporary Bond we got was a couple of years ago on His Majesty's Secret Service, which was a novella, not a full novel.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we only got that because, one, Queen Elizabeth died. Two, Charles was going to be the new king, and so let's do a story around that handover. And so if it weren't for those events, we wouldn't even have that. They got Charlie Higson, of course, who had done the young Bond novels, to do adult Bond, and I thought it was a pretty good book. Some Bond fans didn't like all the contemporary political references, but then again, go back to
That's
the
what Fleming
Flemings.
did.
Plenty, it's like, Khrushchev wasn't a historical figure in Fleming's time. He was a current person. Same with Jack Kennedy. So there were all sorts of political things. I once did a post about it. I mean, in the Fleming universe, trade unions are basically an adjunct of the Soviet Union. So I think that's Fleming's political view kind of seeping into the text. The one thing that struck me was how IFP decided to publicize this, because typically what they've done with these continuation books, they put out an announcement on their website. They also emailed various fan sites. Now, I'm on that email list, and they have this dispatch from Moneypenny, and it's sort of cute, but, it's essentially a press release. This time, they gave it to the Sunday Times exclusively for at least 24 hours. And, it was clearly coordinated because the Sunday Times had the same headshot of the author, M.W. Craven, that would be used in the announcement 24 hours later. And I don't know what's so special about this project that IFP decided to do it this way. The Sunday Times was obviously happy to do it. So a story appears in the Sunday Times, and then the IFP account on X said, "Oh, exciting news in the Times today," and and they have an image of the article of the print edition. So obviously this is all carefully coordinated between the two parties. Again, I don't know what's so special about this particular project that it required all this elaborate method, but
You know what I would have liked to have seen? Like that same dedication applied to Talk to the Devil when it came out a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I suspect it's because they've got a new PR team. And it may simply be that the new PR people just do things in a different way, or this is the way they work, or it's the way they've recommended to IFP. It may be just as simple as that, I think. Who knows?
I think they're doing a good job with, Raymond Benson's rollout and having the different videos that come out with Raymond and getting into the book. Like it's cool to see that they are investing in the literary side. But I'm just kind of surprised that when Talk of the Devil released, like we got that email, but give that a big push. Put that in the Sunday Times. The Ian Fleming, we've got this new collection of his writings, some of which we haven't even seen before, and put that out there and hype it. Because without him, we're not talking here right now.
Absolutely, because back in, I think it was February, and IFP had a launch party for their audiobooks, and I was expecting them to do a similar launch for Talk of the Devil, but nothing. It's very, very low key, and I can't understand that at all, because to hardcore Bond fans, it's what I've been dying to read for decades.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's very odd.
Hopefully, if we do get a new series with James Bond as the lead character for adults, that they give it the same kind of push and attention.
let's move on, because something else that came out in recent weeks is, this new James Bond video game has been in the works for a few years now, and we got a fairly detailed preview. And Javi, you're much more of a gamer than I am, because I'm terrible at it. But what did you think of the preview?
I was so excited. I didn't even think we'd get something that revealing yet at this point. And a lot of it is just a story trailer. There's some gameplay mixed in, but it's a mix of the cinematics and the gameplay. But I mean, it was almost like watching the trailer for the next movie. It was so well done and so slick. And I just appreciated how they built up the narrative in just this trailer, and how there's a lot of elements of literary Bond in it, and obviously with the cinematic as well, with the Aston Martin, and obviously a lot of the brands are very similar to the recent films with Orla Bar Brown and Omega. But I was all for it, and we knew going into it, because I mean, this has been Project 007 for the last 5 years now. It was like 2020 when they announced it. So now we finally get to see something. And they had always, purported that this was going to be, like an origin story, basically. Like there's a trilogy of games, and, we're starting off with him at the very beginning, and he's going to be crafted as you go along. And that's kind of what the Hitman games, to my understanding, are known for, is, giving you choices on how you handle things. And my friend Chris reiterated to me, it's like, playing Hitman is kind of like playing a puzzle. Like there's more than one way to do something, and how you decide to do it impacts what comes later down the road. So I think that's a really interesting team to take on this game, and to, basically start over and have their own unique Bond that's not just, the skin of Pierce Brosnan or Daniel Craig, and, take gamers on like this new adventure. And we've long said, GoldenEye, the video game, struck a chord, and they've been trying to chase that ever since it came out. It brought in new fans to the fold, and I think this is a good way to get in the younger crowd or a new crowd. And yeah, it feels like there's a little bit of inspiration. I don't want to say retread of Casino Royale, but there are definitely Casino Royale style elements.
That's certainly the impression I have of it. I haven't studied the trailer in any great detail, but that's the impression that I got right from the start, that it's inspired by Casino Royale.
And that Bond was not fully formed when we saw him. He was a little rougher and dirtier, and maybe not always in, Tom Ford suits.
Well, one element of the trailer that I was impressed with was it established that Bond was present when his parents died in the mountain climbing accident. So that struck me. That was like threading the needle. On the one hand, it is true to the source material. On the other hand, they have put in their own twist. It'll be interesting to see, will there be more of that in the actual game itself? But I was impressed with that. That, clearly, these developers have studied the source material. They do know it. And it's not like they're, faking their way through it.
And he's got the scar.
Yes, I noticed that too, yeah.
The only time the scar ever came up for the films was in Richard Maybaum's first draft of Thunderball in 1961. He wrote it before the part had been cast. So in the stage directions, it's basically Fleming's description of Bond, including the scar. So that's as close as the scar has ever come to the films. Yeah, so they've clearly done their homework, no question.
And it looks similar in style to like Everything or Nothing or Bloodstone, where it was a third-person perspective and, just an original adventure that just, from what we saw, it felt really authentic to the world of Bond. And I know that there was some concerns that Eon wasn't going to let there be any guns. Clearly, that's not an issue here. And there's there's different ways of playing, too. Like, it's not just a shoot-'em-up game. I would assume with the Aston Martin that there's going to be some kind of a driving mission. At least I'm hoping there will be, because that's always a fun element. And prior games like Nightfire have incorporated that in. Everything or Nothing had several different vehicles, and you got to drive the Vanquish, Porsche Cayenne, and I forget what motorcycle. I don't think it was Triumph, but they had a motorcycle level as well. So It seems to be taking all these different aspects, and there was even scuba diving in the trailer, and a little bit of seduction thrown in. I mean, it felt like a perfect Bond cocktail, and we haven't seen anything new live action in 4 years now, and we're still a year away from this, but at least it feels like we've got something big to look forward to.
And I noticed that the IO Interactive have also released an add-on or something for Hitman, which is with Le Chiffre. And have you played that?
Not yet. I just got the game like 2-3 days ago, and I haven't had a chance to sit down because I want to devote a few hours to it, and I just haven't had the moment. But I think it's only up for a month. Yeah,
that's right.
So, but the fact that they got Mads Mikkelsen in, who is in this excellent video game called Death Stranding, which also has Léa Seydoux. So it's nice to see him, back in this genre. And I mean, he's Le Chiffre. And it looks like, from what I've seen of the demo of it and the little synopsis when you download it, it seems like this is an alternate reality type situation where the setup is very similar to Casino Royale's, where he's lost a lot of money, he's trying to win it back. It's a specific casino in Paris, so like the name's changed. And instead of being Bond, you're Agent 47.
Okay. But it's interesting that they've gone for a villain who is, nearly 20 years old in the film incarnation of him.
I think of the last 20 years, like that's arguably the most popular of the movies that he made.
No, certainly.
If you look at, a lot of the other actors, he tends to be like a fan favorite. So I think it's an easy pull. I mean, to think that next year is going to be 20 years of that movie.
I know, it's nuts, yeah.
But it still left that lasting impression. And with the fact that it's a video game, they can de-age him and it'll look just fine. Something we didn't point out, though, is there's a whole bunch of different ways to unlock things already. That if you sign up for their email or if you play the Hitman game, it'll give you extra content for when First Light does come out, including an outfit that looks very Live and Let Die / Spectre inspired, if, pick your preference. But you got the tactical turtleneck look that you can get for the game when it comes out.
Okay. So this is a kind of sub-Bond prior to the actual Bond.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to be like, this is what you can expect.
Well, and I just want to say, it's like, again, I'm not a gamer, but I think this is very encouraging because I think the franchise needs to reach out to a younger audience. And it worked once before in the 90s, and hopefully it'll work again. So just because I don't play games doesn't mean I don't follow the impact that the games have. So we shall see.
I'm not much of a gamer. I did play the Quantum of Solace game and Bloodstone, which I did enjoy, but really anyone who's listening to this who's the kind of same generation as me will, and from the UK will know that my games were things like Jet Set Willy and Manic Miner on the ZX Spectrum. Unfortunately, I would play this, but I can't actually game anymore because both my wrists are knackered. Using a joystick or any kind of repetitive movements like gaming. It just means it just kills them, so I don't.
The only Bond game I ever played was the From Russia with Love game with Sean Connery doing the voice, and that was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I was just so bad at it. I even found the cheat sheet. I still couldn't get through the game. Knowing, I could only get about halfway through it. You know, it's like, you know, they put in the Aston Martin DB5 in the game, and like, I couldn't. I was crashing the thing. I finally gave up. But you know, that was a weird game simply because you had old Connery voice with a new, you know, young Connery figure in the game. But
yeah. There was definitely like an uncanny valley aspect to that.
Yeah. Well, one other thing we want to touch on is the 4K Connery movies, Connery Eon movies to be precise. That doesn't include Never Say Never Again. They are out and they are going to customers, at least in North America. Well, Javi, you got the 4K set. How does it look?
Really good. Really, it's interesting. It's kind of a convoluted story, and thedigitalbits.com has a really great breakdown. They're still working on it. They've done the reviews for the first 4 films so far, but basically, this is not the Laurie restoration from 20 years ago now. They completely went back to the film negative and remastered it because so many tools have come out, even in the last 5 years, that have made remastering film prints, you know, all the better and more accurate. And those old Blu-rays at the time, or DVDs, were designed for the TVs of that era, and they weren't looking at certain things. They were just trying to make it look good. And that meant bolstering the colors and doing a lot of artificial sharpening.
I remember the first time I saw the Lowry restoration of Dr. No, and one of the things that bugs me throughout the movie is the color of Quarrel's shirt. It is so intensely red, and the color's way off for me.
Yeah.
Well,
and on the Apple versions are they have them in 4K, or they used to, and the skin tones, they vary wildly. What were you going to say, Bill?
I was just going to say, at one point, I don't know if this was a Blu-ray or what edition this was, but it was in the 2000s, and there was a Thunderball where they changed the sound effects. It's specifically the one I remember the best. It's when Largo's going to the Spectre board meeting, and he's, you know, the front they have in Paris. And so in the original, you know, he presses a button and it's kind of this smooth hum as the wall goes back and revealing the boardroom. But in this home video set, it sounds like a steam engine or something. Chunka, chunka, chunka. Like, why'd they do this?
All the early Bond films were mono, so they remixed the sound, and they had to redo all the sound effects for, I don't know how many of the films they had to do, probably all the Connery ones. It wasn't until, I guess, the 70s that, you know, Dolby Stereo became a thing, or at least widespread. So it was just going from mono to more of a home cinema experience, I think.
So here's the thing about the audio on this new set. They all have the original theatrical soundtracks, so like a mono, but it's split into like a DTS stereo. But they've completely remixed the movies for Dolby Atmos, which are supposed to, I haven't listened to all of them, but it's supposed to be really good and not too distracting. But with Thunderball, it doesn't explain it when you pop in the disc, but there's an alternate audio track, both for mono and for Atmos, that has, at the very least, I don't know about the audio you're talking about, Bill, but at the very least, the scores are different. Because I remember having Thunderball on VHS, and it was a different theme at the end when he's being airlifted away. And then when I think it was the DVD version or the Blu-ray, like it just became the generic James Bond theme at the end. So at the very least now, when you come to those scenes, you can pick which one you want to hear.
Well, in 1995, at the second and final official James Bond convention, Eon-sanctioned James Bond convention, early in the day, they had a presentation, and they showed both versions. So they said to the crowd who was standing, "Which one do you want?" "Oh, we're going to go with the James Bond theme from here on out." And I thought, wait a minute, why can't you have both? In some form or another. I actually prefer the non-generic James Bond theme, but that's whatever. I mean, Thunderball's just an odd duck anyway, because there's two versions of the line when he gets out of the pool and Void's getting eaten by a shark and other things. I mean, there's like maybe a half dozen audio differences throughout the movie. So I mean, yeah, that's odd anyway.
But in terms of like the picture quality, from what I've seen, and reading again on the digital bits, apparently like when they shot the original 3, the intended aspect ratio was like a 1.75 to 1, which when it came over to the US, it got blown up into a 185 to 1, or the UK was 166 to 1. So for like the UK versions, you would have bars letterboxing on the sides instead of horizontally. And that's pretty much been the way at least the first 3 have been seen for at least the last 10 years now, are in the 166 ratio. But apparently originally it was supposed to be 175, and then the 2 different territories adapted it to their screens. But this will be the first release where it's in the intended aspect ratio. So I've seen some people say, oh, well, the image is cropped now, but it's just, this is how it was supposed to be seen always. And what we are used to before is a different cropping from how it was framed, what like Terrence Young intended. They completely restored it from the ground up, so it's going to look more grainy than it used to, if that makes sense. The resolution's still there. There's tons of details in the suits and the texturing and the fabrics and the walls and everything. It's just now it looks more like a film, if that makes sense. It's not, they didn't use a lot of DNR to make it look smooth and waxy and contemporary. It looks like a movie of its time, but in a good way. There's still plenty of detail, and like I was talking about, like the color of like faces, like the Dr. No, like the casino scene at the beginning was just almost garish, like the way the light would capture on their faces and their skin tones, and now everything's much more natural looking, and I think a little more pleasing to the eye. And, you know, some people may disagree with that. You know, they may also like motion smoothing on their TVs. But, you know, film is supposed to look a certain way. And this definitely looks more accurate and like a film, especially one from that era. And there's always going to be aspects of the movie that aren't going to look perfect. Anytime you get a shot that's been, you know, processed, like the main titles or some of the rear projection stuff, it's always going to look off because the resolution is so great now that you can tell, compared to pop in your VHS and everything blurs together because it's so bad.
It's hard to reconcile the fact that we used to be perfectly happy watching Bond films on VHS not that long ago.
But it's those little details, you know, that you know, show you how the movie was made. And if you go back to like the Connery's Rolex and how everyone thought that NATO was black and gray until we got better resolution at home and saw the different colors.
I was actually going to mention just that point, because it went from watching it on TV or watching it on VHS and it was black and grey. With DVD, it was, well, hang on, it's not a 2-color. But then there was an argument because some people were saying that they thought it was an artifact, and then Blu-ray, and some people were still saying it was an artifact. And we need 4K to actually decide this thing. So you need to go and look at your Goldfinger 4K and tell us what colour is Connery's watch band. I bet you'll find another colour in there now. We'll find out that the tricolour band's wrong.
Just as a footnote, apparently North America is getting this 4K set first, and the UK will get it in a few weeks. So we were kidding, just to be clear. So Calvin Dyson put out a post on X, and it has this dour image of Connery from Goldfinger, and it says, well, I hope you're all happy that you're getting it first. So then I did what we used to call a quote tweet, where I said, and I hope that all those live UK Bond shows are making you happy. And I put a smiley face on it. Just so you know, Calvin put a like on my post. So it's like, you know, it's all kidding, not to be taken seriously, but I did find it's like, you know, this little crumb the North American crowd got about getting the Connery UK 4K set first.
I think in the UK it comes out on the 30th, so there's not that much longer to wait. I think Calvin will be in a good mood soon.
I mean, if the choice is, do I get to see the new Bond movie first, or do I get to see a 60-year-old Bond movie in higher definition first? I think I'll take the new movie first.
Yeah.
So
yeah, good luck with that.
I think Calvin's winning on this one.
All right. Well, I tell you what, we're about 35 minutes or actually a little more into this, so I'm going to put a pin in it. We're still waiting for news about Amazon Bond 1, aka Bond 26. Maybe we'll find out more soon. That remains to be seen. But there is news happening on both the literary front and the film front, at least through home video. So that's something. It used to be a state of suspended animation. It's not that anymore.
In La La Land, too.
Oh, right.
That Goldfinger vinyl
Yeah.
with the 007 store exclusive that costs $20 more than the La La Land exclusive. But that was really cool to see that they've got a mixture of the UK and US releases on one vinyl record for the first time. And the fact that that's not the only one that's coming, and the fact that we're getting more CD soundtracks as well from them for Bond, like that. It's been a weird month. All of a sudden, feast or famine. We went from nothing almost to an occasional La La Land release and a book every now and then to here's this book news and here's a Felix Leiter book and here's a new game trailer and here's some new soundtracks to buy. And now I'm just waiting for Omega to release the watch that's going to be in the game.
Yeah. Well, do you think they get together and they say Bond fans are all complaining again? Should we put some news out again? But we're going to put it all out in the next 10 days. It's got to be in the next 10 days. Then nobody can say anything for another 6 months.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, thanks for reminding us about the soundtrack. Javi, Honor Matches Secret Service, I guess, is in the pipeline from La La Land. It was mentioned in passing.
Yeah, I think so.
In the trades. Not a specific release date was mentioned, but sooner than later. So it'll be interesting to see what extras. I have the original vinyl Majesty soundtrack, and, soundtracks that came out for movies released at Christmas tend to be spottier, tend to have fewer tracks when they first came out because, they United Artists wanted to get them into the store. So you had to, go with what you had. So the original for Majesties, the original for Diamonds Are Forever, and others, where the movie came out at Christmas, they're Thunderball was pretty skimpy as well, the original release. So yeah, so from the soundtrack, it's kind of a golden age now. So, all right, that's it. David, Javi, thanks for making time, and
thanks, Bill. Great talking.
We'll be back soon on the 007 Files. Take care.